A warm Wednesday, taking a look out at our Galveston camp, Moody Gardens. Pyramids looking good on this hot Wednesday. We're continuing this conversation. If you're caring for an elderly parent while caring for your children at the same time, you are part of what's called the sandwich generation.
And here to continue our conversation about coping with aging parents and juggling life's other responsibilities, therapist Angela Soper. Thanks for staying with us. So before the break, we were talking about coping with aging parents. And I think so much of the focus of this conversation is surrounding their care and their happiness, but we also have to think about ourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
How do we do that best? Self-preservation.
Yeah, so being a caregiver is exhausting. You're pouring out. And at some point, you've got to fill back in. And so one of the things you can do when you're talking about caring for aging parents is if you have siblings, you can tag team, take turns. For some people, you can get caregivers to come in and do something called respite care, which means you go away for a vacation or a weekend and they come in and take care of your parents. So really, self-care is essential.
Well, and people shouldn't feel guilty also, right? I mean, I think that balance of you don't want to feel selfish like you're doing what's right for you, but at the end of the day, I think you use this analogy, you put on your own oxygen mask on the plane before you help someone else.
That's exactly right.
Here, right?
Yeah, and it's a great analogy to use because you really can't help somebody if you're depleted. If you're lacking oxygen, your child's going to get hurt. So if you fill up and you feel the guilt, you have to remember that you've got to fill up to pour out. That's the best way I can put it. So yes, it's the oxygen mask.
And before the break, we were chatting lengthy about sort of that one pivotal point of taking those car keys away, or the doctor having that be kind of the final result, that loss of freedom.
Right.
And we touched on it a little bit, but that is a real significant area of caring for our aging parents.
It really is. I think one of the things that we've got to do is we can come in and feel like we're doing the right thing, and we are. But if we don't consider that we're asking them to sell their house, give away their keys, go into assisted living, let go of their friends, possibly sometimes moving to another state, we're losing a big piece of connecting with them. And so if we come in with a savior idea, it's going to be missed if we don't understand that it's a huge loss for them.
And you were saying, too, that the word help is a really gracious word. Sometimes we all need help, but that also can turn in negatively to the person receiving that.
It can. If you are the person who's hearing that and somebody says, here, let me help you, if you don't feel like you need help, the natural reaction is to do this. No, thank you, I don't need your help. And so I think the best thing to do is to talk to your parents, again, before there's a crisis and say, I love how things are going now, but think about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if the situation changes, what would you want it to look like? And then maybe go from there. But if you say, how can I help you? It really puts them in a position to ask their children to give them something, and that's not the place.
And then they're in that defense mechanism.
Exactly.
And if ultimately the parent stays in that defensive position and they don't want to move out of their house, they don't want to go through their belongings and downsize, what are you left with? I mean,
argument, really, you know?
Right. Well, and I think that's one of the reasons. Think about the older generation. Having a medical person involved gives a sense of authority. And it's also not your children saying, here, Mom and Dad, this is what you need to do. But if you can get a medical person involved who can partner with them and have a discussion that gives a little bit more weight, that might be helpful. The other thing that I would tell people is, if your parent is ever in a hospital, ask to speak with the medical social worker and get them involved and find out what the resources are in the community, because they have ideas that we can't even think of.
Angela, for many of us, as we see our parents age, our parents are everything, right? I mean, our confidant, the person who takes care of us, we see them as bright and energetic. As that starts to shift or change and we see their health decline, or they start, losing some of their abilities, what should we keep in mind as we go through this process? Because this can add so much stress to people.
It so can, and I think one of the things that I tell my clients is that this is a period of grief. Really, and so there's going to be a lot of emotion that can be really confusing. Anger can be one of the things that can crop up, and it's not necessarily that you're angry at your parent, but you're angry at the situation. And then there's tension between the parents and you feel guilty. You know, I just snapped at my mom and my mom's struggling with X, Y, or Z. And so it is being able to take care of yourself. It might be that this is the time for you to go into therapy to process this, all the various emotions that you're dealing with in taking care of your parents.
Wow.
Not an easy road.
Not an easy road, but I think also important to remember you can still continue creating new memories even through this process.
Absolutely.
It's not like someone's life is over.
Correct.
It's just a different chapter in life,
right.
Angela, thank you so much for
Thank
stopping
you.
by.
Thanks.
Great information.
Wow, what a great conversation. Hey, if you would like to connect with Angela, you can log on to her website, sopercounseling.com. Thanks again. That was great.
And still to come.